right, man, let's talk about Abraham and Isaac and how they point toward your sacrifice for God. And go ahead and turn to Genesis, the 22nd chapter. And I'm not going to read the whole chapter. I'm just going to pull out certain verses, embolden certain clauses and sentences that will help me make the point that I'm trying to today. All right, so go ahead and turn to Genesis, the 22nd verse. Yeah. And in Genesis, the 22nd verse, you'll find the story, as I said, about Abraham and Isaac, right? God required of Abraham to sacrifice his son, right? Now, this was an incredibly pivotal moment in time, right? What was happening, the results of what was happening in this moment has reverberations that's active, that's alive in this moment. Right now, as you and I are looking at each other, it's still active today. It was an incredibly consequential moment, this conversation between Abraham and God, right? But God needed Abraham to understand that, right? There's one thing to say, hey, Abraham, this moment right now is pretty important, compared to, hey, Abraham, I'm going to need your son on this one, right? Two deliveries of a message and two different deliveries of understanding, right? That's one thing to understand something intellectually. There's another thing to actually have to emotionally, physically obtain knowledge, right? And that's what this moment was. God needed Abraham to understand the weightiness of that moment, right? So what God did was he conducted an experiment, all right? Let's look at the first verse of the 22nd chapter. Genesis, the 22nd chapter, and we're going to look at the first verse, if I can get my pad open. Genesis 22:1, and it reads as follows. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, as he said, behold, here I am. All right. So again, God was in this moment conducting an experiment to display to Abraham the weightiness of this moment. And you find that when God said to Abraham in the first verse, God tempted Abraham, right? Now, in this temptation done by God, this wasn't God taunting Abraham, right? God wasn't holding a carrot in front of Abraham's face and was like, okay, what are you going to do? Right? This wasn't God trying to pull Abraham from the promise, trying to taunt Abraham away from what he was trying to do in this moment, right? God wasn't playing the role of Satan in this moment, and I think that's an easy interpretation when we hear that God is tempting someone, that God is kind of fulfilling the role of Satan in this moment, right? Kind of like in the story of Moses and Pharaoh, right? In the story of Moses and Pharaoh, the Bible says that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. So God got involved in that whole scenario, and he hardened or made that moment more difficult for Moses, right? But this isn't the same situation, right? God tempted Abraham, but it's easier to understand it by understanding that God was in this moment conducting an experiment, so that to display to Abraham the consequential nature of this moment, the consequential nature of what's happening, right? God was trying to show Abraham if Abraham and God were like-minded, right? The temptation wasn't to make Abraham's life more difficult, but it was to turn on the light, to reveal to Abraham more so the consequential nature of what was happening. So what was so consequential in this moment, right? What was so pivotal about this moment that all of this is happening? Well, God and Abraham were creating a new relationship, right? Now, they weren't creating a relationship, a simple relationship, right? Hi, my name is God. Hello, I'm Abraham. Okay, great. We're friends now, right? It wasn't one of those simple introduction, baseline level friendship relationship being created here, right? Right. It up until this moment, as far back as Adam and Eve, God had enmity with man, had beef with mankind, right? We know what happened. Adam and Eve did what they did. God and mankind essentially went their separate ways, right? So God had beef with mankind up until this moment when Abraham and God are having this conversation. So this moment becomes more than an introduction of God and Abraham. This becomes a situation where God is returning his love to mankind, right? God is creating a new relationship with mankind in this moment, right? So that's the weightiness of this situation. That's the pivotal essence of this moment. God was getting rid of his beef with mankind in this introduction, in this conversation with Abraham. So God was creating a very serious relationship in this moment, right? And just like any other relationship that God creates, he requires sacrifice, right? Now, the essence of sacrifice is suffering, right? Let's be honest. You are not doing any serious sacrificing if you're having a good time, right? Right? So the essence of sacrifice is suffering and discomfort. Okay? Now, hear this. The value of the thing or the person that you are sacrificing displays the importance of the thing or the person that you are sacrificing for. Right? So God in this essence, in this situation, was asking Abraham, how serious are you? Right? In God's mind, this pivotal moment was really important, and he needed to see, was it equally as important to Abraham, in the mind of Abraham. So God was requiring of Abraham a sacrifice that displays that importance, right? God knew exactly what he was doing in this moment. He knew exactly the weightiness of what he was asking, right? Let's look at the second verse, right? Genesis, the 22nd chapter. We're going to look at the second verse, and it reads as follows. And he said, take now thy son. This is God talking. Take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. right? Again, God knew exactly what he was asking, right? God was, in this verse, pressing a button in Abraham, right? He was pressing a button of intimacy. He was pressing a button of sentiment. He was pressing an emotional button, right, on Abraham. Abraham, give me your son. Right now, that's tough alone as a parent to give up your child, right? But God kept pressing. Abraham, give me your son. Do you understand the weighty nature of that request to Abraham? Right? Abraham was of a people that were Semitic. That means they traveled everywhere. They traveled to live, right? And they lived wherever they sat, wherever they landed at night. They lived upon the land where they ended up at the end of the day, right? And sons were important to that life because sons could aid in building camp, aid in hunting, aid in protection, right? And if they were people who sold things, if they were vendors, the son could aid with their business, right? So what God was requesting of Abraham was not just important to Abraham personally, but it reflected in its importance to the family, right? But God kept pressing. God was like, give me thine only son. Sons carry your lineage, right? So God kept pressing. Give me thy only son, the one that I know you love, right? This new pivotal relationship, God was requiring of Abraham a sacrifice, requiring of Abraham discomfort that reflected that relationship. God needed to know in Abraham, is this equally as important to you as it is to me? God was asking Abraham, how important is this relationship, this new thing that I'm doing in your life? How important is this new thing that I'm creating? Are you willing to sacrifice? Because your sacrifice indicates if this thing is important to you. To what extent are you willing to sacrifice, Abraham? Because the extent to which you sacrifice displays even more so if you and I are on the same page. Even more so if what I'm trying to do in you is important to you as it is to me. Abraham was willing to make the sacrifice, right? Abraham was like-minded with God. God and Abraham were equally yoked about this new relationship, right? Abraham said, bring my son over here, right? Abraham, again, was willing to make that sacrifice. And what happened is because of that. Let's look at the 16th and 17th verse. Genesis 22, 16 and 17. And it reads as follows. And God said, on the 16th verse, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, that in blessing thee I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gates of his enemies. And it goes on and on. This was a tremendous blessing, right? This was the blessing of Abraham was beyond our comprehension, right? But it was a response to Abraham's willing to sacrifice, right? So an important relationship to God, right, must be important to you, okay? And you display that importance by your willingness to sacrifice. You display that importance by the extent to which you are willing to sacrifice, by your willingness to suffer severely, right? And out of that willingness to suffer severely comes the tremendous blessing of God. All right? Now that's a mouthful. And I'm going to say it again. Out of your willingness, because of, as a result of, in response to your willingness to suffer severely, comes the tremendous blessing of God. That's what it says in this verse. Let's look at the 16th verse again. This is the angel speaking to Abraham, but the angel was speaking God's words. The angel said to Abraham, and said, in the 16th verse, by myself I have sworn, said the Lord, for because, stop right there, because, in response to, as a result of, okay, because thou hast done this thing, because thou hast sacrificed in the way that you have, right? Because thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, because of the extent to which you are willing to suffer, because of your willingness to suffer severely, this angel said to Abraham in the 17th verse, that in blessing you I will bless thee. All right? So the I will bless thee came because, as a result of, in response to Abraham's willingness to give up his son, his only son, his willingness to suffer severely. It is out of the suffering severely can God bless a tremendous blessing. All right? Are you suffering severely right now? What are you asking God for? Are things bananas in your life right now? Hey, can you not save a dime no matter how hard you do? No matter how hard you save? Every dime that you save has to go away. Your car breaks down. The IRS comes out of nowhere, right? Why is your wife literally trying to take everything from you right now? Why is your boss trying to fire you in this moment? Why is it that you could be doing something totally innocuous, unthreatening, and somebody walks up to you and provokes you? Why is everything in your life bananas, crazy in your life right now? Well, it could be one of two things. One, it could be the reflection of a new relationship that God is creating in your life, right? And number two, it could be the necessary and the requirement. This craziness in your life right now could be the requirement for the blessing that God has for you, right? You got to understand that your sacrifice, man, your sacrifice represents the ceiling of God's blessings, right? That which you are not willing to give up represents the ceiling as to what God can, how God can bless you, the extent to which God can bless you. That which you're not willing to give up, the extent to which you're willing to suffer, will equal God's ability to bless you. It reflects how important what God is trying to do in your life. Your willingness to suffer severely indicates to God His ability to trust you in what he's creating in your life? There is no relationship with God. There's no new thing with God. There's no relationship with God at all that doesn't require a sacrifice. And that sacrifice will indicate to God if you two are on the same level or on the same page, like-minded, equally yoked, about what he's trying to do in you, do out of you, do around you. And once God understands you two are on the same page, through your sacrifice, through your willingness to suffer severely, does the blessings of God come. And the blessings of God always reflects your sacrifice. All right, man, I gotta go. I hope I got this across to you, the importance of sacrifice. God is requiring of you to give something up. In every new relationship, whatever God is trying to create in your life right now, whatever God is trying to do in your life, there will be a sacrifice. You will have to give something up. And the extent to which you are willing to give up, what you're willing to give up, the value of what you're giving up will dictate the blessings that comes from it. All right, man, I gotta go. Don't run from your sacrifice. Don't think because you are sacrificing, you are suffering, that something is wrong. It's part of it. It's God creating something new in your life, and it's God trying to filter through those sacrifices, that suffering, the blessings, the tremendous blessings of God. All right, I gotta go, man. Share this video, man. Somebody needs to understand that their sacrifice, that thing that God is requiring of them to give up right now, may be tough, it may be something important to them, maybe something emotionally valuable to them, but they need to understand as well that it's because God is creating something new in their life, and it will be out of that sacrifice. Because of that sacrifice, God will bless them tremendously. All right? Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Tell me in what way has God required of you something intimate, something sentimental, right? Give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down about what you think. If you don't think God blesses us because of our sacrifice, let me know what you think. All right? There's a bell icon, man. Click that bell icon if you haven't. Subscribe, and it'll let you know when the next video has been posted. I say it this week, I said it last week, I'll say it every week. I appreciate you showing up, man. My name is Jeff Staten, and this is Pressing Toward the Mark with Love.